Hey gang, Jason Little back again here with a third of a handful of videos to help bring us up to speed on day one. Let me share my screen. All right, so this slideshow is called Layout Process. So there was a time in which I would be getting my visual ideas out on paper for my comic for the first time by doing layouts. And I was letting the drawings be quick and ugly. And I used a process in which I would draw an entire panel, write the dialogue for that panel, draw the backgrounds for that panel, and then move on to the next panel. So making a complete laid out panel at a time and then moving on to the next one. And I found that after a couple of those panels, I was really tired. And I realized that I have the kind of brain that finds it difficult to do more than one thing at a time. So if I'm thinking about characters and backgrounds and dialogue and panel configurations and facial expression and costume and architecture and landscape and also all the different sort of things that can be in a panel, if I have to think about all that at the same time, I just become exhausted. So this layout process slideshow is going to show you a method that encourages you to think about only one thing at a time, but to think about it on the entire page. So let me begin. So the source material for this page is like a comic book series that I came up with about a rich woman who is like an adventurer, and she travels around the world, and her best friend is a talking mandrill. So it's kind of a ridiculous story. So this is a sort of a plot. What we're looking at here is a plot for an 8-page story. And I'm not going to read the whole plot to you. But I'm going to use this to show my methodology. So if you write a 1-page plot for an 8-page story, and you happen to be working on an 8-page story these 3 weeks, so that's very convenient, and you can get it onto 1 page like this, then it's cool that you can then be able to break it up into pages by marking it up. So here you can see this is everything that I wanted to get on page 1 is in that first box. And the slicing it up that way helps me visualize it. Moving from text to image by this kind of like marking up is a good way to start the visualization process. The next thing that I do is look for anything that's going to require some photo reference research. And what that really means is underlining all the nouns in the text. So anything that ends up turning into an image, I'm underlining in blue. So in this case, New Orleans, gated and balconied turn of the century house, photographers and journalists. And then I take all that and I write it up as a list: doorbell, male mandrill, roaring mandrill, knuckle walking mandrill, living room, Mara, bathroom. Maybe in fact, I'm going to read page 1 here, just so that you have a sense of the story that we're heading for. New Orleans, a hot summer's day. We see an exterior view of a gated and balconied turn of the century house. Photographers and journalists cluster outside the gate, and a hand rings the doorbell. Richard, a talking male mandrill, answers the bell. The journalists want an interview with Ms. Mara to hear about her experience scuba diving at the North Pole. Richard tells them that they can read Ms. Mara's statement online like everyone else. The journalists press him, but he gets angry and scatters them with a roar and a display of fangs. Richard then knuckle walks into the living room where Mara reclines in a bathrobe, her hair up in a towel, reading a book on South American ruins. Okay, so there's all the stuff that I'm going to need to draw on page 1. So then I go to the internet and I start to do my photo research and I start to download photos. So New Orleans, gated and balconied turn of the century house. So Mara is rich, so she lives in this mansion in New Orleans. And it's got to be classic in this case, classic Southern New Orleans style, fancy house. Let's see. So then a throng of journalists are outside the gate. So I needed a bunch of reference to see what kind of clothes they wear, what kind of cameras they have, microphones, other equipment like that, camera bags, facial expressions, a variety of, racial, gender, size and shape. And then we've got the weird thing, which is this talking mandrill. So I had never drawn a mandrill before, so I need to know for sure what a mandrill looks like. So I've got a variety of mandrill images. And that coloration on the lower right-hand panel, that is for real. Mandrills are really that colorful. Okay, great. So then again, Mara is rich and she's got all sorts of crazy furniture in her living room, which is a mix of modernism and antique stuff. And then here's costume reference for Mara. Cotton summer bathrobe, towel on the head, and that should do it. Okay, so then I took this additional step of writing it all up as a script and breaking it down into panels by thinking in terms of text. I'm definitely like equally visual and equally textual. I'm fortunate that I'm comfortable in both worlds, thinking in terms of words and thinking in terms of pictures. And I tend to think in terms of words first. I find that this is kind of unusual actually for cartoonists. Most of them want to dive in with the pictures right out of the gate. But I gotta be me, so I'm just showing you the way I do it. So so I've written it all out and I've divided it up into 7 panels. 7 is kind of a sweet spot for me. I know that if I get to more than 7 panels on a page, it starts to be a lot of drawing and I have to draw smaller and smaller as the panels collect on the page. And then if there's fewer than 7, then the page starts to feel a little bit empty for me. So 7 is the one that the count that I shoot for usually, more or less, sometimes more, sometimes less. All right, so I'll read this again. Panel 1, New Orleans, a hot summer's day. We see an exterior view of a gated and balconied turn-of-the-century house. Photographers and journalists cluster outside the gate, jostling for position. Panel 2, a hand rings the doorbell. Bzzz. Panel 3, Richard, a talking male mandrill, answers the bell. We see him in close-up, just eyes through the bars of the gate. Richard, all right, what do you guys want this time? Panel 4, a male journalist and female photographer reply. Journalist, hey man, can you get Mara to come out? Photographer, yeah, we want to hear all about scuba diving under the ice at the North Pole. Panel 5, Richard hops up acrobatically onto the stone pillar next to the gate to address the crowd from above. We see his complete body now. Richard, Ms. Mara is resting now, will not be available for interviews until further notice. She's posted a press release on her social media. Journalist, oh, come on. Can't you get her to come out for just 5 minutes? Throw us a bone, man. Richard roars and lunges at them, displaying his fangs. The journalists scatter. Richard, don't call me man. Get out of my sight, all of you. Panel 7, Richard knuckle walks into the living room where Mara reclines in a bathrobe, her hair up in a towel, reading a book on South American ruins. Richard, I got rid of those parasites. Mara, Richard, come look at these pictures. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about a thing called a thumbnail. A thumbnail, just some definitions here. We've talked about layout already in the previous slideshow. A thumbnail is a tiny, messy plan for a page as small as 1 inch high, so really small, that is readable only by you. A layout is a larger plan for a page that is drawn quickly and ugly, but can be read and understood by anyone. All right, so let's take those definitions, which are probably pretty vague, just as words, and let's turn them into pictures so that you can see the difference. All right, so thumbnails. That's a thumbnail. And this is an explanation of my process for making thumbnails. You see the comic page on the right-hand side. It's full of little scribbly images. You can sort of vaguely discern the panel separations. If I was to take that page and show it to my mom and say, Ma, I made a comic. Here, read it. She'd look at that and say, oh, that's very nice, dear. But she wouldn't be able to read it because the dialogue is not there. You can't tell the characters apart. You can't really understand the background drawings. It's just very tiny and very vague. But I made it so I can look at it and be like, okay, there's my New Orleans house. There's the gate. Here's the journalist. That's the finger ringing the doorbell. There's the close-up on the mandrill peering through the bars. And so it's a great way for me to quickly get down my ideas, and that will trigger my memory and help me then redraw it larger as a layout. Okay, so you can see I've broken this up into kind of a sequence. So here's how I think about it. So here's a close-up of the super tiny, impossible to read thumbnail. which literally is only this big, by the way. Okay, so the reader will always have questions. Where and when are we? Who are these people? What are they doing? What are they saying? And what are they feeling? All right, so here's the answers to all those things. The answer to the question, where and when are we? The solution to that is to draw recognizable settings or backgrounds. Who are these people? You need to differentiate the characters. If the characters all look alike, that's going to be confusing to the reader. So you're going to want to have tall characters, short characters, fat characters, skinny characters, dark characters, light characters, old characters, young characters. Any tool that you can use to bring diversity to your characters is a good thing. The reader wants to know what the characters are doing. And so the way that you impart that to the reader is to put the characters in deliberate poses. If you can tell what the character is doing just by the configuration of their body parts, then that's a victory. The reader wants to know what the characters are saying. You just have to write all that dialogue out. Just legibly enough for us to be able to read it. In the layout, it doesn't have to be pretty lettering. It just has to be minimally legible. The reader wants to know what the characters are feeling, and the way that you tell the reader that is to put distinct facial expressions on all the characters. They can be very simple. Just a couple of dots for eyes, a mouth, happy mouth, sad eyebrows, angry eyebrows, happy eyebrows. Not all that difficult to do. All right, so here we've just aggregated this. So good layouts will have recognizable settings, differentiated characters, readable poses, readable dialogue, and readable facial expressions. So now let me bring that, let's see, into a process strategy. Okay, so my strategy for layout is to do one thing at a time on the whole page. And the steps that I go through are panels first, then balloon shapes, then put the dialogue in the balloons, then draw the characters as stick figures, then put in the backgrounds, then put faces on the stick figures, and then put costumes on the bodies. And then you can move on to the next page. So let's look at that all step by step. So here's my thumbnail, which my mom can't read. And so the next step is for me to transform that into a readable layout on letter size copier paper. Okay, first thing is panels. You can see on this layout, I'm not bothering with gutters between the panels. I'm probably going to put gutters in when I redraw this as pencils on Bristol paper. But for now, this is just a layout. It's still just quick and ugly, and it's just on copier paper, so I'm not bothering with gutters. So I've taken those panel configurations and transferred them exactly to a sheet of printer paper. Then I put in the balloons. And I figured that all out in the layout. You can see the balloons are placed there. But then I've looked at the amount of dialogue that I want to have in each balloon, and I've changed the size of the balloons to match that quantity of dialogue. And you might ask at this point, like, how do I know how much dialogue fits in a balloon? And the answer is, unfortunately, trial and error. So you will maybe write too much dialogue, and then you'll find that you can't really fit it into the balloons and panels really easily. And that's when you're going to need to start trimming your dialogue down. So just the bare minimum of what the characters need to impart to the reader ends up in the balloons. Okay, then I put in the dialogue. So I got the title, I've got the author's name, I've got sound effects, I've got a variety of balloon shapes depending upon the affect of the character. And I've put in all the dialogue in all caps and emphasized some words by underlining. And that's an interesting thing that's kind of a tradition in comics, is that some words end up being bold so that the dialogue is kind of performed for the reader. It's like acted, it's like pre-acted with these emphasis words. Next is stick figures. Great. So I'm using what I call the advanced stick figure, which is where the arms are divided into an upper arm and a lower arm. And we've got a torso and a pelvis for each character. And that makes for a very posable little mini like wire mannequin. And I've also got like center of head and eye line defined for each character's head. And I've also, for establishing shots, like this exterior establishing shot at upper left and this interior establishing shot at lower right, I've also taken the opportunity to throw in just like a basic perspective for the backgrounds. Since I've got space to fill there, when I'm doing the stick figures, I may as well just throw that in too, just as like a placeholder. Okay, then, whoops. Then next is backgrounds. And this is where I really have to lean heavily on my photo reference. So I found that I took the exterior establishing shot background directly from the photo. You can see the photo at the upper left there ends up landing pretty identically as the exterior establishing shot in my layout. Now, here's something about me. I really love drawing backgrounds. So the backgrounds that you see in these layouts is probably more detailed than you're going to end up in your backgrounds. Another confession is it was kind of a stupid idea for me to draw a crowd scene as a demonstration for class. So this page looks pretty cluttered with a lot of characters. Chances are your story is going to not have quite so much in the way of crowd scenes like this. And I kind of want to steer you away from a lot of crowd scenes because it ends up being a lot of drawing. Anyway, so you're getting to see me like give myself a real workout with like ambitious backgrounds and a crowd scene and all that. So my layouts here are kind of maybe going to look like your pencils are going to look more like my layouts, but I'm like a million years older than you and I've been doing this forever. So it's understandable that I'm going to have like fairly detailed layouts. Okay, so then the next step is facial expression. So here you can see the stick figures with the backgrounds, and then suddenly, bang, faces appear on all of them. I'm thinking about hair or the absence of hair, but also about facial expressions. So I want to know what each character is feeling, because there's like, this guy's like expressing disappointment, but she is expressing sort of like kind of a cocky enthusiasm. And then here we see various flavors of abject terror with sweat droplets flying off of them. Anger on the face of the mandrill. So what the characters are feeling turns out to be pretty important. So if you can get that in the layout, then that would be super. Okay, then finally, the last thing is costumes. And that brings more flesh to the bodies as well, and brings variety to the characters as well. So there's a big difference between like a polo shirt and a sports coat and this like scoop neck short sleeve shirt. So that's important. And that's the process for me. So it's really all about thinking of one thing at a time. So just to review it, it's like panel borders, balloons, dialogue, stick figures, backgrounds, facial expressions, costumes. So it's a seven-step process. And you can always watch this video again. I think I might even give you a handout that has all these stages laid out for you. Okay, thanks a lot, gang.